What if I told you that you could seriously boost your performance and even your well being with a simple 10-minute writing exercise? I know, it sounds almost too good to be true, right? But today, we're diving into a psychological tool that has some surprisingly powerful and long lasting effects. So let me ask you this. Have you ever been there? A boss, a teacher, maybe even a friend gives you some perfectly good, well intentioned advice, and your gut reaction is just, nope. You push back, you get defensive, you maybe even dismiss it completely. It's a totally human response. We've all done it. While that feeling, it has a name. It's called psychological threat. And no, we're not talking about physical danger here. We're talking about a threat to our self-image. It's like this little internal alarm that starts blaring the second we feel like our competence, our character, or our place in a group is being questioned. And look, this psychological immune system is there for a reason. It's trying to protect our sense of self-worth, which is great in the short term. But over time, those defensive reactions can become a huge roadblock. They literally stop us from taking in valuable feedback, and that can really get in the way of our ability to learn and to grow. So what if we could lower those defenses? What if a simple 10-minute writing exercise could reduce the racial achievement gap for middle schoolers by this much? 40%. Just let that sink in for a second. That's what researchers found, a 40% reduction. How is that even possible? Well, let's take a look at the surprisingly simple intervention that's behind this incredible result. Okay, so the exercise itself is incredibly straightforward. You give students a list of personal values, things like creativity, relationships with family and friends, maybe having a good sense of humor. They just pick the 2 or 3 that mean the most to them personally, and then they write for a few minutes about why those values are so important. That's it. And the writing they do is deeply personal. It's not some kind of academic essay. It's just a moment to reflect. It gives a student a chance to connect with a core part of who they are, a part of their identity that has absolutely nothing to do with how they're doing in a tough class or scary upcoming exam. It just seems way too simple to be so effective, right? So what's really going on here from a psychological perspective? How does writing about your family make you a better math student? Well, it all comes down to this core concept called self-integrity. See, at our core, every single one of us is deeply motivated to see ourselves as a good, competent, moral person, just in general. It's a fundamental human drive. Now, here's the problem. When we face a specific threat, like, say, we bomb a test or we're dealing with a negative stereotype, it can feel like an attack on our entire sense of self. It doesn't just feel like, oh, I did poorly on this one thing. It can feel more like, I am just not a capable person. And that feeling leads us down 2 very different paths. So without affirmation, our psychological immune system goes into overdrive. We get defensive, we dismiss the threat, we might even blame others. But with affirmation, something shifts. We suddenly have the psychological resources to stay open, to actually learn from feedback, and to push through the challenge. At the end of the day, this affirmation works by broadening our perspective. It's like it zooms you out. It's a powerful reminder that your self-worth isn't just tied to this one test or this one class. Your identity is huge. It's anchored in all these other values, whether that's your relationships, your creativity, or your sense of humor. And suddenly, that one threat just doesn't seem so big and all-consuming anymore. But, and this is a really big but, self-affirmation is not a magic bullet. It's not a cure-all. For this to really work, the conditions have to be just right. So, let's get into the fine print. Yeah, the research is super clear on this. For this little seed of affirmation to actually grow into something meaningful, it has to be planted in the right soil. Context, it turns out, is everything. Psychologists have actually boiled it down to what they call the 3 T's for an intervention to be effective. First, it has to be targeted at someone who is actually experiencing psychological threat, like a student who's worried about negative stereotypes. Second, it has to be tailored to the right problem. It helps a threatened sense of self. It doesn't teach you a skill you don't have. And third, it has to be timely. You have to deliver it at a key moment, like right at the beginning of a stressful school year. So that brings up the next big question. If the intervention is just this brief little 10-minute exercise, how in the world can its positive effects last for months, or in some cases, even years? The answer is something called recursive processes. You can think of it like a positive feedback loop, or a snowball rolling downhill. It's an upward spiral, where one small, positive change starts a chain reaction that just builds and builds on itself over time. Let me walk you through how this spiral plays out in a school. Okay, so a student feels affirmed and a little less threatened, so they perform just a little bit better on a quiz. Now, the teacher sees that little improvement and offers some encouragement. That positive feedback then boosts the student's confidence and their sense of belonging, which in turn helps them perform even better on the next test. And you can see how the cycle just keeps repeating and getting stronger. So you see, the self-affirmation exercise, that's just the initial spark. For that spark to turn into a lasting fire, it needs oxygen. It has to be fanned by the resources that are already in the environment, things like supportive teachers and real opportunities to succeed. And I want to be clear, this isn't just some clever life hack. This is a practical tool that is grounded in decades of really solid psychological theory. It perfectly captures what Kurt Lewin, the father of social psychology, famously said: there is nothing so practical as a good theory. So all of this leaves us with a pretty provocative and I think a really important question. Now that we know the incredible potential of this simple idea, how can we start to intentionally design more of these moments, more of these opportunities for affirmation into the very fabric of our schools, our workplaces, and our communities?